Welcome to Meditations from the Mound, a ministry of the Chestnut Mound Church of Christ located in Chestnut Mound, Tennessee. My name is Carver Moore. I'm one of the ministers for the Chestnut Mound congregation. And friends, did you know, whether you realize it or not, church leaders have very tough jobs, very rewarding jobs, yes, but some days are worse than others. I know personally as a minister, there's some days where everything's going right, but then there are other days where just nothing I do seems right. I mean, it's peaks and valleys. There's days where you're on the mountaintop and you feel like there's nothing that you can't accomplish, and then there's other days where you're just in the valley and just everything's working against you. And there's also people out there that tend to label ministers as men that only work 1 or 2 days a week, and the rest of the time they spend watching sports, they spend on the golf course, they spend going to ball games. And ministers tend to get unfairly labeled as lazy. But in 1 Corinthians chapter number 9, we see that the Apostle Paul is writing his first letter to the church there at Corinth, and he's defending himself. He's talking about the work of a preacher, and he's talking about here how that he feels like preachers need to have the same benefits, the same opportunities, the same treatments as any other profession. Because that's what preaching is. Men get into preaching because, number one, they love souls. But we also get into preaching, we also get into ministry because we have to make a living for ourselves, for our family. But in 1 Corinthians chapter number 9 and verse number 11, Paul talks about preachers when it comes to material blessings. Look with me, if you've got your Bibles handy, look with me at 1 Corinthians chapter number 9 and verse number 11. That's 1 Corinthians 9 in verse number 11. Paul's speaking here. He says, if we have sown spiritual things for you, is it a great thing if we reap your material things? So Paul says what I just got through talking about. He says, if we're going to preach, if we're going to teach, if we're going to help you out, we deserve some sort of material, physical compensation. We've got to eat. To sum that up, we've got to provide for ourselves. We've got to provide for our family. Later he goes on and talks about how, preachers have the option to get married, to have a family. Then later on he talks about how preachers should practice what they preach. And so I want to ask the question. I want to inform you. What do ministers do during the week? And this is not meant to puff myself up. This is not meant to puff up the preaching profession. It's just meant to tell you, to let you see kind of a behind the scenes of what we do during the week when we're not in the pulpit. Because, friends, believe it or not, we're in the pulpit for a much shorter time than we are anything else. We spend more time out of the pulpit than we spend in it. So friends, what do ministers do during the week? Well, we should check in with the sick and those who can't help themselves. Look with me at the book of James, chapter number 1 and verse number 27. That's James, chapter number 1 and verse number 27. James 1 and 27. James speaking here, he says, pure and undefiled religion before God and the Father is this, to visit orphans and widows in their trouble and to keep oneself unspotted from the world. So ministers should spend their week checking in with the sick and those that can't help themselves, and also focusing on practicing what they preach. That's a common theme throughout the Bible, not just for the men that stand up and proclaim the good news before other brothers and sisters, but for everybody. You should practice what you preach. You should live the gospel of Christ every day by your example, by your words. Just by the way, friends, that you live your life. Secondly, ministers should be transparent. Look with me at Ephesians 4 and verse number 25. Ephesians chapter number 4 and verse number 25. Paul once again speaking here to the church at Ephesus. He says in Ephesians 4 and verse number 25, he says, therefore, putting away lying, let each one of you speak truth with his neighbor. For we are, now listen to this, for we are members of one another. Why do we keep secrets from each other? Are there things that we just don't tell other people? I mean, I'm sure there are, but when it comes to our churches, do we fill the congregation in on people that are sick, people that need prayers? Do we fill the congregation in on just matters pertaining to the building, to the budget? Are we transparent about these things? And we'll get a little bit later on, we'll talk about the role of elders and deacons and just the men in general that make up our congregations. But ministers should be transparent. They shouldn't hold anything back. If they get told something in confidence, of course you would keep that way. But if you get told something, somebody requests prayers of the church, or somebody is baptized, why would you hold that in? Why wouldn't you make the rest of the congregation aware of that? So ministers do, and we should be transparent. And thirdly, friends, ministers do, or we should, study. 2 Timothy chapter number 2 and verse number 15 says, "Study to show yourself approved, or be diligent to present yourself approved unto God, a worker that needs not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth." Friends, how is a preacher going to be effective in the 20 or 30 minutes that they are in the pulpit, or the hour that they're teaching Bible class, if they don't study throughout the week? Where would they be? We'd get up in the pulpit and ramble. The congregation wouldn't be able to move forward. It would harm us, but most importantly, it would harm those that we are ministering to. And more importantly than that, guess what, friends? It's going to harm God, because everything is done to glorify Him. So preachers, ministers, we do and we should throughout the week study. And friends, you know what's significant about all these things: serving others, being transparent, studying the Word, is that everybody, not just men that are talented to get up in the pulpit and preach and teach the gospel, but everybody can do these tasks. Everybody can participate. You don't have to be a minister to preach and teach the gospel of Christ. You can preach by the way you live your life. You don't have to be able to get up in the pulpit, if you're a man, to get up in the pulpit and bring a sermon. Romans 10 and verse number 14 talks about the importance of ministers, the importance of having a preacher. Look with me at Romans 10 and verse number 14. In Romans 10 and verse number 14, Paul, speaking here again, says, "And how shall they hear without a preacher?" You know, preachers are important. Every congregation has to have one. Why? They've got to have somebody to feed the flock. Spiritually feed the flock. Help the flock. Help the congregation, the brothers and sisters that are gathered there at that local congregation, to help them grow spiritually. We should also take time to thank the elders and the deacons and just the men of our congregations, because behind the scenes there's so much that goes on. You know, at Chestnut Mound we don't have elders, we don't have deacons, but we've got a great group of men that carry out things like building and grounds, worship, spiritual outreach, handle the treasury. These men often go days, weeks, months, maybe even sometimes years at a time without a thank you. You know, I feel guilty sometimes because as a minister, as a preacher, I get all the thanks. I get all the credit. And I'm sure Charlie feels the same way. We get all the credit. But we can't forget those men behind the scenes that are working hard to further the gospel of Christ. I want you to remember this week and every week, as we are at this halfway point of the week, I want you to take it upon yourself when Sunday arrives to go up to a man that you know that's involved in the day-to-day operations of the church that you attend, and thank them for what they do. You might just make his day. Friends, thank you so much for watching this video tonight. I hope it's been uplifting to you. I know it's going a little bit long, but this is something that I feel like everybody needs to hear. We need to know what goes on behind the scenes in our churches. We need to know what goes on with being a minister. You know, it's more than just getting up and preaching and teaching the Word one day a week. Friends, if we can help you in any way spiritually, please reach out to us at the Chestnut Mound Church of Christ. We would love for you to do so. We would love for you to join us for worship sometime at one of the appointed times on Sunday. But friends, thank you so much for watching. Take care, and may God bless you.